Welcome to Real Rover. I'm your roving host, John Craig. Real Rover へようこそ、クレイグ・ジョンでございます。Introducing you to people you would never have heard of if it wasn't for Real Rover. Here we go. Our guest today on Real Rover is Nicki Scully, who is an American author, shaman, and priestess. She was ordained as a priestess of Hathor by Lady Olivia Robertson, co-founder of the Fellowship of Isis. She has been visiting Egypt since 1978 and has incorporated aspects of Egyptian magic, lore, and imagery into her shamanic work. She specializes in spiritual tours to Egypt, Greece, and Peru. She did. I know you got somebody else doing that now, but one other point about Nicki we'd like to mention here from her Wikipedia entry is that she has also done important projects like the Animal Circus CD and You Will Fly, featuring herself, Roland Barker, and Mark Hallert, which was created for children facing...
It's actually called And You Will Fly.
Oh, really?
We give it away to kids that are terminally ill or potentially terminally ill, and we give it away to any kid that wants it, you know, ages maybe 4 to 12, and then they can, as soon as they find somebody who's sick, they can give it away and get more. We have lots of them. We created it to give it away.
And so let's just begin there, Nicki. What will that do for the children?
It's a radio play. We were very fortunate to have the founder of E-Trade's wife was in a class here on planetary healing. And while Roland and I were working on this project that we wanted to do for kids. And so she asked me what I was doing. And I said, well, I want to do this project for kids. And she said, well, what'll it take for you to do it? And I said, well, it depends on how we want to do it. You know, if we scrap it along, we'll manage to do it. But if we had some serious money, we do what we needed. The next day, I got a check for $25,000. And that allowed me to hire various bands, including the orchestra from the university, and studio time for 10 days, and people to do the various voices. And it's just a beautiful, I think, I'm glad you brought it up, because very few people know about it, and yet I'm probably more proud of that piece than anything I've done, because we had the ability to do it right, and we did. And we also had money from the Grateful Dead for that one as well.
And so you've directly helped potentially hundreds of children who are facing death.
Absolutely. And we send it to kids whose parents are incarcerated, or wherever kids need spiritual support. It just gives them that, it empowers them that they can do whatever they want, regardless of what limitations they think they have.
Yeah, this is really interesting, Nicki, because, you know, when people think about shamanism, especially in the West, they always have in their minds an adult probably somebody who's already hit middle age and has some kind of a crisis and needs some shamanic healing. But we've just gone straight in the other end, which is maybe those in most need of shamanic healing are actually the fractured and broken children of the world who have absolutely no, they have no signposts in this material age to help them through the profound crisis that growing up in a modern world like this is like. So I am glad we started there. Shamans are for children too.
And we were subtle. We didn't make it obvious that that's what it was, but when you listen to it, and I'll figure out how to get you a copy of it, you'll hear why it what about it is shamanic and how they get to experience an animal circus. The head of the I can't forget what they call the person that's the master of ceremonies.
The ringmaster.
Ringmaster is a bear.
Oh, nice.
And then Anubis, of course, is part of it. And there's a raven that comes and tells the fortune of the child and makes sure the child knows that regardless of how hard things are, they won't be given anything they can't handle. And it's just, I'm just so proud of it. It was such a wonderful piece of work and well done.
So you directly used the idea of shamanic totem animal spirits in a way that wasn't obvious, that would kind of sneak behind the barrier that so many materialists have.
Absolutely, it was so much fun. I made sure, you can cut this if you want, but I told my office when they sent it out to not use our letterhead, because our letterhead would say shaman all over it, and somebody made a mistake, and our main clients, these, I forget what they were called, the angels that go and help these children all over the world, suddenly stopped getting our thing because they realized that there was magic in it. And of course, they don't want to know about that. That's not okay.
Not unless it's Harry Potter, right?
I think these people were burning Harry Potter books.
Well, actually, that project may have happened, that was before Harry Potter. That was back in, when was it? Yeah, it was before Harry Potter, right?
It was a long time ago.
So
but we still have some left, and then we're going to just put it online and make it so anybody can just take it. And the same with the Kuan Yin Journey for Healing, which was the first one that we did as a giveaway. And that's when AIDS was happening. And so it was for people with AIDS and leukemia and cancer. And then it wound up for all people with potentially terminal. And we've given thousands of those away.
Well, that's another important point, because as most people now will probably know, but they may not. And I'll get to your own definition of shamanism in a moment here, Nicki, but healing, not just individual people, but healing in a social sense, your community has always been, of course, a really important part of the shaman's function. But there are people listening to this have absolutely still no idea in our materialistic culture what a shaman is. So let's go into your definition of what a shaman is.
Okay, I use the definition that came from Stan Grof's first wife. Oh, I can't think of her name. She became a Roshi, and she wrote a book in the 70s, The Wounded Healer, Shaman Healer. And how she described shamans were people that crossed between the worlds to bring back power and healing for their communities. And that's a really key part, because if it's self-serving, then it becomes something else. It's definitely, and to be a shaman is conferred by the community you serve. Just because a person says they're a shaman does not make them a shaman. I do not call myself a shaman. I just wouldn't. That's up to the people that I serve. If they consider me that, well, I'm okay with it. But I'm not gonna call myself that. That would
Well,
be arrogant.
there's another word comes up in your introduction, Nicki, that may be more accessible to people, which is priestess. And, the role of the priestess, again, has been lost in our culture. But do you see any difference between the role of the priestess and the role of the shaman in our modern culture?
Well, I certainly see some similarities. It depends on how you were trained as a priestess and who you're a priestess to. Like, I happen to be a priestess to nature itself, to the entire animal kingdom. I wrote a book of the animal totem journeys. I'm a priestess to the entire Egyptian pantheon. They're all there for me and backing me. And then you can see that I have Tara and Medicine Buddha and Saraswati behind me, as well as Sekhmet and Thoth. But I'm just one of those people that are accessible to priestess whoever needs to be priestess in the moment. And
That's actually very in line with Japanese spiritual tradition, where traditionally the Shinto gods number millions. There are millions of gods. Right.
Is that the way it is in Japan? Is it actually nature? They're all associated with nature?
Yeah.
Same in Egypt.
Millions of gods throughout nature. They're all accessible to interaction with humans, respected, venerated, and very importantly, there is a tradition of the Shinto priestess and the priest, both the male and the female. But the Shinto priestesses are still active in the grand shrine of Ise, where they perform, they sing, and of course it's changed through the centuries, but we still have that in Japan at one level. However, the mass of society here, probably like where you are, have been abducted into the materialist realm. So tell us how you see this, how you feel about the modern world, and how shamanism has been marginalized.
Well, it kind of breaks my heart because we are in the materialist world. The whole idea is to conquer nature, and we need to get back to serving nature. We are stewards of this magnificent planet, this Garden of Eden, and we're just raping and pillaging, and it has to stop. And so from the Egyptian perspective, this is Sekhmet's time. This is Sekhmet, my last book, and it's called Sekhmet, Transformation in the Belly of the Goddess. And the whole point of the book is to make these offerings for Sekhmet of all the things that you want to change in yourself, and all the prayers you want for the world, and all the things you're grateful. And you take that to this special, we do it in Journey, this statue at Karnak, and we make that offering. And not so much to our surprise, she takes not only the knots that we tied for her offering, but she devours us. And we remain in her belly while we are dissolved by the digestive process until we are reduced to our essence and pass through the eye of the needle, and then together we co-create ourselves so that by the time we emerge, we are warriors for Ma'at. And Ma'at is both the concept and the goddess that represents truth with a capital T, justice, balance, harmony, and cosmic law, the laws of nature. And we have gone so much astray from being in balance. It's time, it's Sekhmet's time. It's she, the daughter of Ra, the feminine face of the sun, Sekhmet, whose name means power or mighty one. It's her time to come. But instead of slaughtering humans as she did in the original myth, the way it's been handed down for thousands of years, she's now training people to help bring the world back into balance. Because all Egyptian children in antiquity grew up knowing they served Ma'at. And now it's time for us to discover that we too serve Ma'at, and we need to show up as warriors for Ma'at to bring the world back into balance.
Which is exactly what you're doing. You're serving that end to the best of your ability. I was astonished when you told me you'd done 60 tours to Egypt in a period of, a decade or a little bit more. I can't remember, but how many years was that work? 60?
I started in 1978, but I didn't start taking tours till 1989. And then I finished about 4 or 5 years ago.
Just astonishing. So you've literally taken hundreds of people on these trips, thousands, right? On journeys, not just to the remains of an ancient culture, which is what 99% of tourists do. They look at the statue. They hear the stories of the materialistic archaeologists who'll tell you this and that about the Egyptians, but they don't tell you about the inner life of the Egyptians, which is what you're helping people to access. And it's not just the Egyptian inner life, it's the human inner life, but with a pantheon that they developed. So how do people react when you introduce them to a realm that they never might have imagined existed?
Most of them feel like they're coming home.
Ah, interesting.
Most of them, it's like, whoa, I'm home. This is real. Now, I'm used to working mostly with people from the Western culture, although I've had people from all over the world come to Egypt with me. I've never had a Japanese group, but I think that they would find something very familiar from what you've described about their relationship to their pantheon and to nature.
Indeed.
And once they understand that, and they realize how accessible these beings are, how willing they are to work with us to help make a better world, then they're on board. Everyone's on board.
That's really an important point for people to get, that this is not some arcane, difficult to enter mystery school. It's almost as if, what took you so long? I've experienced this too. What took you so long? All you had to do was open the door. But
yeah, well, I'm a catalyst. That's my real job. I'm not a visionary. My husband is the visionary. You know Mark. You've met him. You've worked with him. He's the visionary. I'm the one that catalyzes the experience for people, that somehow in my presence, these doors open. I don't know why. It's a gift.
that's another good definition of a shaman. I don't know why. It's a gift, a catalyst. It's not like you're consciously trying to make things happen. You're allowing things to unfold, but that is a gift. Not everybody can do this. And traditionally, shamans were sometimes outcasts. They were wounded. They were people in this society that maybe weren't very well understood. And of course, the whole world was shamanic. Everybody was shamanic until
Indigenous cultures were shamanic.
every culture, you know, what happened?
Materialism, capitalism got run amok. I mean, there's some good things about capitalism, but it's been so corrupted that it's doesn't work anymore. Just like socialism has some great ideas, but when put to practice, it gets corrupted. So I know there's some shamanic cultures where the shaman is paid according to the health of the community. And it's when somebody gets sick, they look to find out what's wrong with the shaman.
That's amazing. I was an acupuncturist for 10 years, and a traditional doctor of acupuncture in the old days here, it was the same. If you got sick, you, the doctor, paid the patient. Because you're supposed to be able to take the pulses and tell them what's going to happen down the road there. There's a prophetic aspect to it also. And so what kind of a doctor doesn't know what's coming down the line? They'd all be out of a job now.
Lots of them. But at least some of them are willing to tell you they don't know.
Yeah.
It's ones that pretend like they do that make me crazy.
But, you know, it strikes me as absurd that we would sell ourselves out so cheaply when, as you said, we can access these amazing deities, beings, aspects of our own consciousness, however you want to take it, doesn't matter. Something really went wrong about 200 years ago, and you and many others right now are aware of that and are addressing it. And you have a lot of people interested. So tell me like some of the feedback, stories of change, transformations on your trips.
I get amazing letters from people about how their lives were changed. And I mean, I've had people tell me they sold their house in order to go to Egypt with me.
Oh.
I mean, I was just like heartbroken in a way, because I would have found a way to get them there, you know, but their lives can't help but be changed by being in the energies of those temples and the statuary that was carved by adepts who knew how to invest their creations with Ka, the energy, with the life force. And you feel it in their presence. I have a full, bigger than life statue of Sekhmet in my garden that's made from a mold that was taken at Karnak by this woman's grandfather to use in the movie The Ten Commandments.
Oh.
And so it's actually a generation away from the original. And it's amazing how much life it has.
Even though it's a replica, I think Cairo, of course, has the best Egyptian museum on the planet, but the second best is apparently in Turin in Italy, which I have visited. And it's a free museum, anybody can enter. And they have the most astonishing statue, an original, I believe, of Sekhmet in there. And I must have stood in front of her for at least half an hour. And
she's all over. She's in London, in New York, in Chicago, in Turin. And those are real statues, because it's also the most looted country. I mean, certainly Peru and South America was looted, but they melted it all down into gold blocks. And so they've lost that part of their life, you know? But in Egypt, they put it in stone, and that stone was built to last, and it's still there, and anybody with half a mind and an open heart is going to get connected.
Yeah, I think that's a really important point you brought up, Nicki, that they had the ability to imbue stone with Ka, which wouldn't dissipate, which would go right through thousands of years of our history and still be accessible if only we would just open enough to allow ourselves. And that's why the catalyst is necessary.
I think that anybody who walks into an Egyptian temple with an open heart and a curious mind is going to get their mind blown. If they're lucky enough to have someone who can interpret for them, they'll get much more out of it. But the magic of Egypt stands on its own. It's huge.
Have
That's
you
what brought me back and back and back?
But did you not ever encounter resistance from the authorities?
Oh, absolutely.
Must have, right? What happened?
Well, the temple, before the revolution, the temple guards watched over us because they knew what we were doing. They were part of lineage where they got their position because their father had it, and their father and their father. After the revolution, then they started putting the police there. Then things got tricky. And then they outlawed meditating altogether. And so we play this cat and mouse game where the temple guards are helping us, but we're sneaking around, and finally we had to learn how to use the temples to set people up and then go back to the boat and do the work.
This is crucially important. A lot of people won't get this unless they've experienced it. I was on the steps of the Jaguar temple in Tikal with my wife, burning copal, which is totally innocent. And within 5 minutes, 2 guys showed up with submachine guns and said, "You can't do this here." Now, a lot of people in the modern world won't understand the significance of that. that you are now stopped from meditating, from lighting incense, from doing anything to connect you with the shamanic world. I mean, it's pretty severe.
If you breathe like you're meditating, if you close your eyes and stand there, they're going to interrupt you. They are so frightened. I don't know why.
And you know, state-sanctioned mindfulness and meditation's all the rage now. As long as it doesn't bother the authorities, you can sit there and meditate yourself to death. But when it's real, and you're opening doors and Sekhmet walks through, then they get worried. So that must have been really challenging for you dealing with that.
It was a game.
Yeah, how else can you take it?
You know, we think of it like fox. We actually saw foxes occasionally. But I think of Fox as a great ally because he knew how to turn a deadly game, a deadly trip into a game. Outwit riders. What else are you gonna do? You know?
Yeah, but that's precious. That's precious. You to actually turn it into a game. Can you give me an example of one of those situations where you were successful?
Can you imagine 45 people sneaking across a wide open field in order to get to where Sekhmet was? And just by knowing the timing and making sure the attention of the people that would be looking for us was somewhere else, we managed to slip 45 people into her temple.
That's
But it was closed and locked. I mean, we did things like getting the key copied. We'd go during the lunch hour while the French that were doing their work were away. We had a great Egyptologist who's from Luxor. So he grew up with all those guys. So he'd be on the phone with them while we're in the temple, and we'd walk around until he got the signal. Okay, now, boom. And then, but not everybody can do that.
No, absolutely. It all sounds good until you get to the door of the temple and then you realize, wait a minute. Yeah.
But, just so you know, if you happen to be alone, sometimes it's even easier because you can just walk up there and offer them some bakshish, a little money, and they'll let you in. 45, it's a little harder. Then I got it down to my top was, I think, 20, and it was still hard, but we managed.
Well, it seems like
still managing.
It seems like, though, you mentioned earlier, Nicki, that there is so much willingness from the other side, because we started this by you defining shamanism as going from this world to the other and returning with power and healing. So, we have to understand, first of all, that this is a real dimension we're talking about. It's not some kind of, concept. It's real, and therefore real consciousness wants to connect across that gap, and thus perhaps creates these marvelous synchronicities of, getting 40 odd people across a field. That's a huge feat, even for an army, It was
really funny. Oh my God, I couldn't believe we did that.
Well, I'm sure you did many, many more like that, and I know that you've retired from that part of your service to the community, and it has been taken over by somebody else. But there must be
Indigo Ron Love is her name. Indigo Ron Love.
Okay.
And her company is called Mysteries of Egypt, and she knows how to do it. I taught her, and she made a lot of her own connections, and she's the best right now that's doing it.
So you must be very happy to have created another generation of shamans. But what about you, though? I mean, where are you focused now? What do you want to do with your work from here on in? How do you see it?
Well, this is probably the last time that I'll do this, but
You mean right?
Well, this is probably, well, I'm in the process of teaching this work right now.
Okay.
And I probably won't do it anymore, but I don't need to, because all of my books are written so that you can self-initiate.
Oh.
And if you need a teacher, I can do it. I have a whole list of people on my website that can do it. And in various parts of the country, and now that we have Zoom, I can teach anybody anywhere. I'm doing privates, I'm doing mentoring, I'm doing probably 2 classes a year. And I want to get my husband's work out, because we have about 65 of his short stories ready to record and to start letting, one every few weeks we have to create a blog. And his stories they'll be called Stumbling into History or Stumbling Through History. And he's been around the world a couple of times, because he went to Vietnam, and then he had to go and recover someplace isolated. So he picked a mountaintop in Ecuador. And he wound up in his travels around the world being at places where history was being made and nobody was recording it.
Oh.
And things that happen that people need to know happen. And so that's my next project, is to get his work out, because he has seen so much.
Well, you're both an incredible example of partners working together. You've always worked together. And I think that's another important point too, because, here in Japan, it's extremely rare to see husband and wife actually committed to working together on something that will be of benefit to the community and the society. The men's roles are fixed in iron, and the women's roles too. Although the women are very quickly breaking out of these molds, I think another aspect of your work is that you and Mark have always worked together to produce this body of work. You've been more at the forefront until now, perhaps, and maybe now is his turn to come to the forefront. But can you just give some of our listeners an idea of what's the magic that's held you together as a co-creative couple this long?
I don't know whether I can put it into words. It's magic. Once you articulate magic, it's not magic anymore, it's science. And there's nothing scientific about our partnership. What I can tell you is he's brilliant. One of the smartest people I've ever met. One of the most curious people I've ever met. A photographic memory. And all of his senses, inner and outward, are extremely heightened, so that when he goes after a vision, like we'll ask a question and he'll go looking for the answer, He hears it, he sees it, he feels it, he smells it, he tastes it. He knows it at every level and has the capacity to articulate it to me. Of course, he won't remember the next day unless I read him the notes, and then it'll all come back to him. But he gets so out there or in there that he is living the experience. And I'm a scribe. I can type as fast as he can speak. So however we do it, whatever kind of ceremony we do when we're looking for information or looking for a new class or a new journey, when he gets to that place and starts talking, I just start typing. And
that's a pretty good explanation of magic, actually. That's a very good explanation of how you work together. It's kind of ideal. Not very many people I've ever met have got to that place. And perhaps another aspect of your work is to help people to see how that is still possible in an age of marriages that last 2 minutes.
Well, first of all, our marriage, he didn't actually propose to me until the people were waiting for us to get out there on the stage, 300 people. Because we were at a concert, at a Grateful Dead New Year's concert, and we had just had a horrendous week where we had to help his sister cross over. And so we were going through a lot of grief. And all of a sudden, he looked at me and I looked at him, and he said, yes. And we both burst into tears, hugged each other, kissed each other. And the next day we're driving down the street, and I said, hey, Mark, what did you say yes to? And so our whole marriage came from this other dimension. And that is not explainable. But I'll tell you something else. When he was about 17, he had a dream. And it was one of those lucid dreams. And in that dream, he saw all this ice. Or at least that's what he thought it was at the time. It wasn't until recently he realized that was crystals, of course. And he sees himself way off in the distance, sitting on a rocking chair on a deck with wisteria in full bloom. And he yelled, how do I get there? And his future voice yelled back, if you can't get here, we don't want you.
Oh, wow.
And he lived here for about 6 months, not even, because the wisteria bloomed after about 4 months. And he was sitting out on the deck of this house, and he looked at the guest house deck, and there was the wisteria and the rocking chair, and he remembered the dream, and he knew he was home.
Oh, that's a great story. That's a great story. Precog husband. That's wonderful.
Nothing about shamanism.
Oh, really? Oh.
No, nothing.
But you do work together. Maybe we can wrap up this first one with the larger, really much larger perspective of your work, which is planetary healing. And I just looked at on your website I just looked at the last Zoom call that you did for planetary healing. So give us a bit of insight about how that started and where it's going.
It started with unexplainable magic. The person who originally built our sweat lodge came asking if his wife could do a vision quest, and we were having a very important international teacher teaching at home that weekend. But I said sure, and I thought I could just slip into the lodge, because if she was going to be fasting for 4 days, I didn't think it would be too heavy. But it turned out quite different than I expected. I can't get into all the details, but they're in the Planetary Healing book. And it turned out that while we were doing that lodge, Chernobyl blew.
Oh.
And I was asked to do work that wound up almost killing me. And most of the people, everybody that helped me, and I had to figure out how to bring them all back. But we managed to channel the radiation safely. And it's a long story, but it's in that book.
Huh.
And so that book starts with the first work I did with Mark, which happened to be Chernobyl, and then everything that came since then.
So, so you're working with groups of people to consciously, to actively make a difference to the state of the planet. Is that a correct way of putting it?
Yes. Now, Chernobyl happened the same year as, what was that event, that first major event where everybody meditated all at once? Harmonic Convergence.
Yeah.
And so he and I went out and did a ceremony, and we said, please, we would like some tools for our students, something that they can do for the planet for this harmonic convergence that's coming. And we put out the call, and then the teaching started coming. Oh. And we planned to have a class a week or two before harmonic convergence so that people would have the tools and be able to use them at harmonic convergence. And that's how that book started.
That's an amazing story. I didn't realize that harmonic convergence and Chernobyl were so close in time together. It's rather that's a creepy coincidence that these things.
There are so many creepy coincidences, and I do explain a lot of them in that book.
And it's called again, that book?
It's called Planetary Healing.
Okay,
for global transformation. So
you co-wrote that with Mark. That's one of your co-written books. I got it.
And at the end of it, there's it's what's it called? Making Spirit Medicine is a CD with another of the finest journeys that I've ever done. And was done, it's amazing.
So let's wrap up this first interview, Nicki. I think what came to me most from all of your wisdom and your experience was the singular idea of self-initiation. That in the past, the shamans all had a tradition of initiating their successors, and it came very slowly through time. It was very, very ancient way of dealing with that other world. But now You're saying if people approach this work from a self-initiatory point of view, read your books, study your materials, that they can actually get that contact, yes?
Yes, absolutely. We don't have time. Look what we're doing to this planet. We've already passed the tipping point. So now we have to redo our DNA. We have to mutate so that we can survive the mess we've made. And we'll never be able to bring back the garden, but we can still have a future if we can somehow bring back the balance. And so that's where all my work is aimed at now.
That's a very elegant way of putting it and of completing the first interview. So I'll say thank you very much, Nicki. It's been a great learning for me, and I hope for everybody else. And we'll look forward to another one.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
All right. Bye for now.
Bye-bye.
Welcome to Real Rover. I'm your roving host, John Craig. Real Rover へようこそ、クレイグ・ジョンでございます。Introducing you to people you would never have heard of if it wasn't for Real Rover. Here we go.